Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
I want to start today by doing a brief ceremony to situate us in big mind, because at least for me, there's a lot of very personal material in this, in dealing with this precept that is helped by, it helps me to engage with it fully by being in big mind instead of my habitual small, very small mind. So, Lisa, welcome. What I would like to do together, let's give it one more minute. I'm just going to describe it, and then in about a minute more, I'll ring a bell. But I want to say the Robe chant together 3 times. Does everybody have access to the Robe chant there, or have it memorized? I'm going to ring a bell here, if I can find my striker. And let's say the Robe chant together 3 times through. I'll ring the bell at the end of the first time, at the end of the second time, and then at the end of the lines of the third time, and twice at the end of that. Okay? Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. A big claim, beautiful, ecstatic poetry. I see Rosemary has a question. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm what the agreement was with the class. Are you going to be speaking with us? This is such personal, of all the precepts, I was feeling that this is probably the most intimate. And, I wouldn't want anybody to feel inhibited by having a group that's not part of us, except for Nelda there. So if the agreement was for you to be speaking to us with the sewing room there, and then when we respond personally, that we would then, Nelda would participate individually, is that the agreement?
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to talk for, I don't know how long exactly, maybe 15 minutes, and then we will come to a breaking point, at which time I will describe what I would like people to do in breakout rooms or connection rooms. And at that point, we would need to disconnect from the, of course, being in breakout rooms, we need to disconnect from the sewing room. And Nelda, when we come back from that, it would be best if you could be in a room, where it's just the people in the precepts class who are participating. Okay? I'm seeing agreement from Nelda on that. So.
Actually, I need some clarity. Am I hearing you say that for breakout activities in a room by myself? And I understand that. But are you also asking that when I come back from that breakout room, I stay in a room by myself?
Correct.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Is that all right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You won't be by yourself. You may physically be by yourself. Okay. Rosemary, is that okay? Any other questions about the?
Yes, the clarification was very helpful, just particularly given the topic today.
Indeed. And, although I'm going to be reading from some things and quoting, I know that just as in the materials that I sent out before, it's very easy to read between the lines and see a lot about me and about my anxieties and my, all the kinds of things that I feel exposed about, and that I feel takes some courage to share, even in the part I'm going to be reading here. So. Okay, well, thank you for that question. Again, any other questions or concerns? I'm not seeing anybody with a hand raised here, so that's good. So again, just to situate ourselves in big mind before we get started.
Jessica would like to say something.
Yes, Jessica.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jessica.
So just a clarification. I believe that if we've taken the precepts, we are invited to join any precept class that's ongoing. Is that true, Joel?
That's true. And I have certainly done that. I've certainly done it specifically for this class. This is the one about the red thread of sexual desire, and I've asked if I could join for that. I will say that I've shared some readings, and we've had several responses to the readings that will mean that you won't have any of that background for this particular thing. But again, to the extent that people are sharing in small groups and then coming back to perhaps share what they can out of those small groups, I would be more comfortable if it were just Nelda.
Okay, yeah, sure. I just wanted to make sure we were participating in the ways that are outlined. So, yeah, thanks for letting us join, everyone.
And thanks, Jessica, for that reminder.
But okay, so back to what I was saying. Because this is difficult material that is personal and strongly emotional, strongly emotive, and brings up a lot of things. I was just reading a quote from John Wellwood. I'll refer to this later, but he said, the whole thing about love is that there is perfect love, there's unconditional love, but that in our human lives, it is like the sun. The sun shines everywhere, but it makes clouds out of the atmosphere, and the clouds block the sun. And that it's the same way with human love. That as Flint has said many times, that when we love, it calls up everything that is not love as well. And because of this, I just want to do one more thing to situate ourselves in big mind here, and that is true. Something that Jessica quoted this morning in a wonderful talk that she gave about. She was talking about comparison and compassion, and quoting from the writer Brene Brown. And Jessica said that to be able to name emotions, to be able to give language to those things that are simmering inside ourselves, that we often, until we can bring a recognition and naming to them, it's very hard to come out from under their spell. Come out from under their spell. So again, Dogen, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. No trace of realization remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. So very grand, very elevated, but again, actually intuitively correct if you've had a chance to explore any of it. Okay, so we're talking about this chapter, that is the way of engaging in sexual intimacy respectfully and with an open heart. And later on in the breakout rooms, I'm going to give you a preview now, but I'm going to ask you to look at all the precepts that we are dealing with, and talk about them, about them as the penumbra, in the way that one precept is all precepts. To take up the way of speaking truthfully, the way of speaking of others with openness and possibility, or regarding others with openness and possibility, meeting others on equal ground, cultivating a clear mind, taking only what is freely given, and giving freely of all that I can, taking up the way of letting go of anger, and taking up the way of supporting life. And I'm going to ask you in the breakout rooms to talk about the ways in which these other precepts inform your thinking, your living around this particular precept around sexual intimacy. So, okay, explain to me like I'm 5, as they say in various other things. Why does sex exist? Why do we have sexual intimacy at all? Certainly, in the history of life started with one-celled animals. They live forever. They just clone themselves and they live forever. Even though an individual may die, collectively they live forever. Why did that change at some point in the biological history of this planet? It has something to do with the fact that what is alive is not actually the single-celled animals, but the genes inside the animals. And the genes are always looking for new ways to express themselves, and they found a way to express themselves which doubled the number of genes in any individual through sexual reproduction, and gave the opportunity for lots of variations to happen, many more opportunities for variations to happen in populations of creatures, and some of those variations would be advantageous in a changing environment. And of course, the environment's always changing. So that would be advantageous. And it's particularly advantageous after the emergence of a type of life, according to one of my favorite science writers in his book, Parasite Rex. It is particularly advantageous in dealing with the threat to life of organisms that is presented by parasites. That if you are constantly shuffling your genes, that you can develop variations that are immune to attacks by viruses, by bacteria, by worms, by all sorts of parasites that live in this world, and that according to this writer, whose name I'm blanking on right now, but they are the dominant forms of life in this world, not us who think of ourselves as the primary creatures. We're just the hosts to the real forms of life, the parasites, which is a shocking thought. And again, as explicated by Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary theorist, we are pretty much the clothing or the machinery by which our genes reproduce themselves. We think of ourselves as being important as individuals, but at the level of life on this planet, and perhaps of life throughout the universe, it's the genes that are doing the work, and that are just using us as the apparatus for that. So again, that's pretty alienating to think about, but nevertheless, the focus in this precept is on human beings. And we think the focus is on desire. And that seems to speak directly to what Dawkins is pointing to, that we have, that our genes are telling us, reproduce, do whatever is necessary to reproduce. And that we have, that's written in the DNA that tells us to do that is written in every single cell of our bodies. not just the reproductive cells. And we are constructed in ways that we get flooded with hormones and other brain chemicals, and we have reinforcing social norms and sociobiological imperatives that tell us to do that. And I think it's also interesting to remember that, of course, all of life is about reproduction, and that humans are the exception to the rule in reproduction. But in general, for viruses, they just find a host and they clone their DNA, and then they spread some more, and they adapt really rapidly to changing conditions. Same with bacteria. There are forms of life like mayflies that spend all of their lives, or 99% of their lives, a year or two as larvae and then as pupae underwater, and that emerge from the water only to reproduce, to fly in a cloud and share their genes, male and female. And they don't even have mouths. They're not intended to eat or to survive longer than it takes to do the task of reproduction. And then the eggs get laid, and the adults die, and the cycle continues in that way. We may think that we are far away from single-cell organisms and mayflies and those other types of life, but there's a wonderful piece that I have here that was in the New York Times a few weeks ago. It was on July the 23rd, and I don't know if I can hold this up so it'll be visible. It says, "The birds are singing, but not for me." And it's by a man named David George Haskell, a professor at the University of the South and the author of Sounds Wild and Broken, Sonic Marvels, Evolution's Creativity, and the Crisis of Sensory Extinction. It's a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize this year. Well, it was a finalist. He is describing the fact that he's a birder, a lifelong birder. He spends a lot of time identifying birds by their calls, and that this year, or very recently, he could not hear the call of a particular bird with a particularly high-pitched call that he was used to hearing. I don't know if anybody else saw this, but it's called a blackpoll warbler, and it's found in the eastern part of the United States. And that he feels this is a great loss. And the interesting thing about this, and the reason I'm bringing it up, is in this paragraph here, we can lose hearing in many ways. Eardrums, middle ear bones, and nerves can falter, or as can auditory processing in the brain. For many people, loss of function in hair cells in the inner ear are to blame for loss of hearing. These cells, the hair cells, amplify the motions of sound waves in the inner ear, and then turn the motions into nerve impulses. The hair cells in our ears are descendants of the wiggly cilia hairs that animate single-celled creatures swimming around in ponds and ocean water. These cilia enable hearing throughout the animal kingdom, from vibration-sensitive organs in the skin of fish to sound detectors in the legs of insects. Sudden shocks like gun blasts kill inner ear hair cells. This has happened to me from standing next to the speakers at a Bob Marley concert a long time ago. Other losses take time, like prolonged exposure to loud noise. Some pharmaceutical drugs can kill hair cells, but much of the loss has little to do with assaults from the outside. Instead, aging undermines hair cells. Even a life spent drug-free in quiet surroundings would not protect our ears from the erosive power of passing years. Once gone, the cells never grow back or heal. So think about that. You're hearing my voice, and at least part of the ability to hear my voice comes from the fact that we are direct descendants of amoebae swimming around in primeval oceans, over hundreds of millions of years, if not even more. And so, again, every cell, you may think that we are different from other forms of life, but in certain ways, that inheritance is unbreakable. But we are also different in very, very important ways. Humans, like other animals, come into the world needing care. Our mother's milk, literally. And in some species, protection from a father, or even the protection of a whole pack, a whole village, a whole civilization. As I said, the focus in most modern descriptions is on desire, which is, when it's thwarted, painful, right? If it's unfulfilled, it can be very painful. But what seems to me really most important about this inheritance is that it's painful in a socially reinforced way, that we need to be desired. We want people to desire us as sexual partners, right? And to have that thwarted is a difficult thing. We have long lives, and only a certain number of years are focused on or available for reproduction. So most of the time, we are not engaged in literally reproductive behavior, even though the desire for sex for some people is very strong, other people not so strong. But for those for whom it's strong, it doesn't depend on the availability of partners. But the absence of partners experiences pain. So I would, as many ethnobiologists and other folks have remarked, for people, at least in heterosexual couples and in other types of bonded pairs, sexuality is more about forming strong bonds that can carry us through the demands of living our lives, which most strongly have to do with having, rearing, and launching children, and then also forming economic units that can support us through difficult times, the changing environment, literally economic environment I'm talking about here, and the inevitability of sickness, aging, and death. Those types of bonds are usually what get described as love between two people. And it's worth remembering that this type of love grows out of a strategy for passing our genes along, or the genes using us to pass themselves along. Even the genes that require us to have these cilia growing in our inner ear so that we can hear and process that type of sensory information. So desire is almost always thwarted. I mean, it once occurred to me, there are billions of people on this planet that I will never have sex with. And, I mean, that doesn't bother me, but it is a thought. But not being desired seems doubly painful. And that is what has happened, on some occasions in my life. The only real happiness, the Buddha said in his early teaching, giving the example of himself under the tree when his parents were participating in the harvest festival, was being able to access the happiness that's available to everyone all the time. And as John Welwood has written it does not depend on getting what you want. So that's a kind of absolute happiness which is available to us all the time. And it's shining like the sun, but the sun calls up the clouds, which occlude that perfect kind of happiness. We can appreciate, and indeed, I think that we all have an innate sense of connection to life in its totality. But that can sure get lost in those times when our We have this red thread literally stringing all our cells together, every cell in our bodies, telling us literally that we will die and we will have failed as organisms if we don't get what we want in sexual terms when we want it. That's a special kind of pain. And it's one that human beings have been, since the dawn of recorded history, obsessed with, and trying to deal with it. So that's all. It's a lot to practice with. I sent out the poem from Rumi, The Great Wagon, which has this super expansive view of life, but is really focused on that thing. What is the great wagon? Sexual desire. And that poem from Shakespeare, A Waste of Shame in an Expense. Okay, sorry, I messed up the first line already. But anyway, it's all about shame and lust, and how we take heaven and turn it into hell. And then, of course, that remarkable thing that I came across that's very very trenchant about men, about how men in our society have so few outlets for dealing with facing existential threats, like, are they going to be out of work tomorrow? Will they be able to feed themselves? Will they be able to take care of the people they love? All our society, at least in the United States, is kind of like, I see it as being like the action in the play Glengarry Glen Ross, where men are driven to utter dishonesty, utter self-immolation, just to hang on to their jobs, and that there's no outlet for that, and that what happens in our society, as portrayed apparently in the movie Barbie, which I haven't seen, but is that men channel that into an exaggerated reliance on being seen as desirable. That amazing quote that leads in that story by Moises. Barbie has a good day every day. Ken only has a good day when Barbie looks at him. So that says a lot about male psychology, I'll just say, at least in my experience. Female psychology around being seen as desire, well, there's only trillions of dollars spent each year on telling women what they have to do to be attractive, how they are nothing if they are not physically attractive. And, it's relentless. This is a relentless institutionalized pain for women, I think. So, and I'm leaving out the fact that that by and large, not every man, but by and large throughout history, some segment of the male population is predatory, violent, and in the relationships between men and women, in the quote that I sent out from Margaret Atwood, that if you meet somebody for a date, Margaret Atwood says, the men worry that the woman will laugh at them. The women worry that the men will kill them. So I'm glossing over that part. But at any rate, the whole issue around being able to deal with people in terms of sexual intimacy, in openness, and with care, compassion, respectfully, with an open heart. This is Ahsoka sent out a quote from Noah Levine, an extended quote about sexuality from Noah Levine from his book Against the Stream. And to me, this is the stream. This is the stream that we are all fighting our way through all the time. I mean, it has many currents within that stream, but this is the big one. So Ahsoka also sent out another piece yesterday or today. I didn't see exactly when it was sent, but it's very raw, very I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. It's very raw and very personal and has a lot of pain, and it took a lot of courage to write. And that's too much for me, I'll say. And it's too much for me to demand in a situation like this. So as I said, I want to move to breakout rooms now, but I don't want to ask for what Ahsoka did. And what I want you to do is, in the breakout rooms, is to look at the list of the precepts. I hope everybody's got a book or some kind of reference that they can go to look at the precepts that we are dealing with in this course. If you have something to take notes now and you don't have that handy, please take some notes now. The first one is speaking truthfully, the way of speaking truthfully. The second one is speaking of others with openness and possibility. Third one, meeting others on equal ground. The next one, cultivating a clear mind. The next one, taking only what is freely given and giving freely of all that I can. And next, the way of letting go of anger. And finally, the way of supporting life. So here's what I would like you to do in the breakout rooms. Sit for 5 minutes. Write for 10 minutes individually. 5 minutes each. No, let's say 3 minutes each. Available to share what you have written, if you are willing to do so, and no one is required to do so. If you have, during that time, you can just sit with the others. I ask you not to talk about anything else, but and not to cede your time to anyone else, but just sit in silence with others and enjoy this as a practice, as an extension of our practice. And then 5 minutes for sharing or reflecting on what other people have shared, and then we will come back together.
When you're saying write for 10 minutes, write relative to the precepts in regard to this particular one?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So just say how these other precepts inform your thinking or experience, either in terms of difficulty or in terms of opening and liberation with regard to the precept around engaging in sexual intimacy with an open heart and respectfully. Okay? Because surely the other precepts have to do with respect and openness. Right? Okay, so let's say 3 people to a room. So I see Marla has raised her hand.
Procedurally, I just noticed when I came back that it said we're being recorded now. Is that a fact, or did that get turned off?
So I think for this discussion, it might be a good idea to turn off the recording for this part. What do you think? Anybody, would you raise your hand if you oppose that idea? So again, raise your hand if you oppose the idea of turning off the recording. Jay wants to keep the recording going.
No, I just have a question. I mean, okay, so isn't the whole community our Sangha? Like, I'm curious, what do we, and no offense, right? What are we hiding by taking it off? Like, why like, what's the fear in being our authentic self and sharing it with the Appamada community? You know, like I may not be saying this correctly. I mean, of course, feel free to turn it off. It doesn't affect me one way or the other, but I'm just curious as to the request to turn it off and not share it, you know. Yeah, okay.
Okay, can I answer that, Jay? I think the thing is that this video will be on YouTube, so it's not only the Sangha that can watch it. So maybe for
Okay.
things that are so private, it's better not to record.
No,
Maybe people can be uncomfortable for it to be seen by whatever person online.
yeah. No, I didn't know that. I thought it was one of those that you could put on YouTube, but it's not shared. Like, you cannot find it unless the link is shared with, you know what I mean, right?
I'm not sure, Joel, is it available for everybody online, the Precept videos or not? I'm not sure about that.
I believe that it's available to everyone.
Oh, okay. So
It could be otherwise. And again, it is, my answer to your question, Jay, is if people have concerns about being seen, even by others in the Sangha with whom they have not shared their
Okay.
kind of journey up to this moment, you know,
understood.
they have a right to that feeling.
No, yeah, exactly. I was just curious as to, you know, so thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Great question. And yeah, I mean, it's not.
So I
Okay.
stopped the recording, right?
Very good. It is now turned off.
It still says recording.
It says recording, Nellie.